Hi everyone, this is Mariam. I'm a product marketing associate at Netcore Cloud and we're on to our fourth episode in the series Cracking App User Retention. Today we'll discuss a lot about user activation and how it actually helps optimize the key metrics for your app. While so far we've spoken about successful products built on the concept of habit loops and how onboarding is the starting point to create these habit loops and get users started on your app. But it's almost impossible to make your product a success unless you are identifying, tracking, and optimizing the right user activation activities. So, as a product person, what are some of these activation points or the data points you must be gleaning on? Well, we'll get to the bottom of that in this video. We'll talk about what user activation is, how do you define your user activation metric, and what are the steps you need to take to improve it. Now, activation is that stage in a user's journey when they actually get value from your app. It's when users start using and engaging with your app. The way I look at it is the action a user takes that reflects the user's intent to come back to your app. For instance, for Pinterest, it would be users pinning an item. For an Uber, it would be users setting in their pickup location or adding funds to their wallet. For an EdTech app, it would be users attending a live class, say for 10 to 15 minutes. For an OTT app, similarly, it would be users watching a video for a few minutes. And maybe for a food delivery app, it would probably be users saving their delivery location. So once users have performed these actions on your app, you know that you've successfully activated them. And you know that these are the actions that would lead to higher conversions. But the next question on your mind probably is that how do you arrive at these activation metrics? How do you define what action indicates activation? Well, the timeless strategy to do that is identify actions that retain users. This comes from understanding what retained users are doing on your app. And this is where you also need to dig a little deeper into your product analytics and track the right user behavior. As an example, in a research, Facebook identified that users who added 7 friends in the first 10 days were successfully retained as compared to those who did not. So you need to map out the retention rate of the users who performed an action versus those who did not. And that action then becomes your primary activation metric. Overall, the idea is to analyze multiple user activations, chalk out the retention curve for each, and the one which has the highest retention rate becomes the key metric that you need to chase. So while you analyze this, it's also important to analyze the features that users are engaging with most and the features that retain users the most. And then it's time to sunset those features that are not very popular with your users. Now, to be sure that you have got your activation metric right, you need to be confident about three things. One is the user's commitment to your app. Second is that the activation action should give users the value they were looking for. And lastly, it should tie back to key metrics like conversion and engagement. So now that we know what user activation is and what are the ways in which you can actually define that activation metric for your app, the next thing you need to do is understand how would you get users to perform these actions actually. Now, based on the interactions a user has with your app, you could create these ideal user paths where you understand the entire user's journey on your app, you identify the potential drop off points, and more importantly, understand that why users are dropping off. And you then take the right steps to ensure that users complete that journey. As an example, let's say for a fantasy gaming app, their activation point would be users adding money to their wallet. Now, it's a possibility that users drop off before doing that. So, to prevent that, you may want to highlight, say, a joining bonus that has been credited to their account. This would get users to, probably play their first match and come back to the app again. So the idea here is that prompting users towards the next best step with visual cues like nudges in the form of, say, subtle tooltips, coach marks, beacons, or spotlight. It actually gets them to perform the activation activity. You then track the activation rate based on the number of users who end up clicking on that nudge and performing the action. What more you could do is also trigger these walkthroughs that actually guide users through the know-how of the app and make it easier for them to basically take that activation or perform that activation activity on your app. To sum it up, majority of the brands you see lose out on their customers right at the top of the funnel. Users churn out before they even take a single action on an app. So activation is definitely a tough nut to crack. But if you get it right, if you fix the top of your funnel, then moving users down the funnel, that is, to convert, engage, and retain users, becomes much more easier than what it actually is right now. And on this note, I come to an end for this video, but do stay tuned in as we have more such discussions coming up on the theme app retention.